Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
It was the most scathing attack the world ever witnessed, and it changed the whole world for bad. Thousands were killed, and thereafter, the war in Afghanistan and Iraq killed more than 1 million people. After 9/11, the question which was being asked was how did someone attack the USA in such a big scale? The question should have been why they chose to attack the Americans in the first place. And why would someone in their right mind attack and kill innocent civilians? To understand this, we'll have to go back in time, to go back in 1940s to understand the whole theory leading up to 9/11 and Al-Qaeda. The person in concern is Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb was born in Egypt and was an Egyptian. He was a very highly trained, qualified individual who had close ties to the government as well as to the military. He studied and worked at Wilson Teachers College, Washington, D.C., and also went to Stanford University. In 1948, the Egyptian government asked Sayyid Qutb to travel to the United States to learn about the education system. But when he gets there, he feels disgusted. The question is, why did he feel disgusted? And what made him feel disgusted? And the answer is, he hated the American lifestyle. He hated everything about the Americans, from the way they dressed up, from the way they lived their lives. But it was the year 1949 when one of his colleagues invited him to a church dance in Greeley, Colorado. And Sayyid Qutb happily accepted the invitation. Now when they got there, when they got to the church to attend the church dance, Sayyid Qutb looked very comfortable, looked very fine. And when the church dance was about to begin, the pastor dimmed the lights, and the song was "Baby It's Cold Outside." And when the dance began, what Sayyid Qutb saw and quoted by him in one of his books, where he says, "Where chest met chest, and lips touch lips." He was disgusted by this. What he saw, what he witnessed was something he could never imagine could happen. Sayyid Qutb comes back to Egypt in 1951 and joins a free officer movement being led by Gamal Abdel Nasser and General Naqib. The idea is to overthrow the monarchy, so they join hands. They join hands together along with the Muslim Brotherhood in order to overthrow the monarchy and make sure that after the monarchy is overthrown, they can establish their own Islamic Sharia law in Egypt. But that doesn't work that way. The monarchy is overthrown in 1952. Yes, they succeeded in that. But where they failed was that Gamal Abdel Nasser had different ideas. Sayyid Qutb had no idea that he'd been backstabbed by Gamal Abdel Nasser. They had several meetings after the overthrow of the monarchy in order to discuss what kind of laws they want to establish in Egypt. When all this was happening, General Naqib was already appointed as the first president of Egypt, and Gamal Abdel Nasser was appointed the first prime minister. The understanding they had was once General Naqib and Abdel Nasser come to power, they will help establish Islamic Sharia law in Egypt. Sayyid Qutb and the Muslim Brotherhood realized it very soon that Gamal Abdel Nasser has different ideas on his mind. They already knew that Gamal Abdel Nasser was never on the team. In 1954, the Muslim Brotherhood, along with Sayyid Qutb, planned an assassination of Gamal Abdel Nasser on the military day parade. Gunshots were fired at Gamal Abdel Nasser, but he survived. He survived in a way not a single bullet hit him. He escaped the assassination, and it took him a very short time to find out who was behind the assassination. Immediately, he gets all the Muslim Brotherhood members in jail along with Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb is in jail along with all the Muslim Brotherhood members, and President Naqib is put under house arrest. Mahfouz Azam was appointed the lawyer who will protect Sayyid Qutb and get him out of prison. Mahfouz Azam was no ordinary person. He was one of the finest lawyers in Egypt in those days. Mahfouz Azam was also the uncle of Al-Qaeda founder Ayman Zawahiri. Ayman was only 16 years old when all this was happening in Egypt. Sayyid Qutb faced a lot of torture in prison along with his colleagues from Muslim Brotherhood, and he couldn't believe his own eyes on what he was seeing. He was wondering, how can one Muslim torture another Muslim so much without having any sort of mercy? Sayyid Qutb was sentenced to death in 1966. It was on 29th August 1966 he was hanged to death. Gamal Abdel Nasser succeeded in doing this, but his predictions were very correct. His prediction was correct in a way he knew that Sayyid Qutb is capable of a lot of things. After his hanging, people were running away from Islamic Jihad because they saw the fate that Sayyid Qutb met. The only person who was not running against this was Ayman Zawahiri. Ayman Zawahiri was very inspired by Sayyid Qutb. He was moving towards Islamic Jihad and has been quoted saying, "The hanging of Sayyid Qutb was a changing point in my life." Sayyid Qutb's brother, his family, extended family, was spared. They were allowed to go. And scaring for their life, worrying for their safety, they fled to Saudi Arabia. Sayyid's brother, Muhammad Qutb, immediately flees to Saudi Arabia and is given a lot of space in public to speak there. The person who follows Muhammad Qutb was none other than Sayyid's lawyer's nephew, Ayman Zawahiri. He accompanies Muhammad Qutb to Saudi, and Muhammad Qutb is allowed to speak in the King Abdul Aziz University in Jeddah. The two students who never missed his lectures were Osama bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri. They made sure they attended all his lectures. They never missed his classes. Osama bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri became friends. They became friends only because they shared the same ideology in what Sayyid Qutb preached. Sayyid Qutb has been quoted in his book saying, "The Islamic society that follows Islam in belief and the ways of worship in law and organization in morals and manners." Not just this, he also said, which is very critical, which also has been quoted by Osama bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri, and that is, I quote, "The abolition of man-made laws cannot be achieved only through preaching. Those who have abused the authority of God and are oppressing God's creatures are not going to give up power merely through preaching." Iran, on the other side, at that same point of time, was having its own kind of revolution. In 1978-79, the revolution started gaining momentum, and the Shah was under pressure to go out. The success of the revolution in Egypt had now moved to Iran. What they saw in Egypt was a successful revolution where they were able to overthrow the monarchy as well. And now it was time of the Iranians to come on the streets. The Iranians were protesting against the Shah, who they considered as an American puppet. They wanted Shah to go. And the guy leading this revolution was Ruhollah Khomeini. Ruhollah Khomeini was a very famous Islamic preacher in Iran during those days and had a lot of ground support as well. But he was somehow unable to overthrow the Shah and was hence sent into exile to Iraq. When he was in Iraq, he was still supporting the revolution from outside. And that's where the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt had conducted meetings with Ruhollah Khomeini in Iraq in order to support him to overthrow the Shah. Now, when these meetings were taking place, there was a strategy put in place. What they did was they translated Sayyid Qutb's articles, Sayyid Qutb's books from Arabic to Persian, and they started giving it out to Iranians on the street, on the ground level. Now, this generated a lot of more support for Ruhollah Khomeini, and in the end, in 1979 February, the Shah was overthrown and he ran away to the United States. Ruhollah Khomeini comes back to Iran, where millions of people on the streets welcome him, and he's appointed the supreme leader of Iran. And Iran, from then onwards, is converted into an Islamic republic. Ruhollah Khomeini once famously quoted, and I quote, "When anyone studies a little or pays a little attention to the rules of Islamic government, Islamic politics, Islamic society, and Islamic economy, he will realize that Islam is a very political religion. Anyone who will say that religion is separate from politics is a fool. He does not know Islam, he does not know politics." Unquote. Sayyid Qutb, in a very indirect way, even after being hanged in 1966, played a very major role in this revolution. The role being his books, his articles were very famously publicized in Iran during this revolution, which actually motivated a lot of hardliners to garner more support and overthrow the Shah. The movement, which started in Egypt and then moved on to Iran, has now moved on to Saudi Arabia, where in 1979 December, mob led by Shiite Muslims and militants go and capture the Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia itself. Shiite Muslims wielding guns, explosives, supported by Iran, went on to capture the Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia. The demands were very simple for them. The demands were to let the Wahhabi style of Islam flourish in Saudi Arabia, and the king declined. The king said that will not happen. But there was so much pressure on the king, and he was worried, what if he meets the same fate of what happened in Egypt and Iran? It took 2 weeks for the Saudi special forces, which were supported by the Pakistani special forces and the French special forces, to recapture the Grand Mosque. There was blood everywhere, there were people killed from both sides. After this, the king allowed the Wahhabi style of Islam to flourish in Saudi Arabia. Following the attack, the Saudi King Khalid implemented a stricter enforcement of Sharia, and he gave the religious conservatives more power over the next decade, and religious police became more assertive. The difference was very simple. The difference was that the presence of Muhammad Qutb, the presence of Ayman Zawahiri, the presence of Osama bin Laden was a major difference when the king felt pressurized into giving away all this. Ayman Zawahiri once quoted a poem by Sayyid Qutb, and I quote, "Brother, push ahead, for the path is soaked in blood. Do not look left, do not look right, but look only up to heaven." Unquote. These were exactly the ideas of Sayyid Qutb, the ideas which he wrote in his books, the ideas he preached to all his followers, that all Muslim countries should have Islamic and Sharia law. And therefore, the presence of Muhammad Qutb in Saudi Arabia, teaching in several universities and having a lot of followers, garnered support for this movement in Saudi as well. And that led to the pressure the king faced in allowing the Wahhabi-style Islam to flourish. Not just Ayman Zawahiri has been quoted preaching Sayyid Qutb's literature, so has Osama bin Laden. In several of his videotapes, he has quoted his books such as Millennium and the Concepts which should be corrected. If we have to defeat terrorism, we have to stop giving space to people like Sayyid Qutb, people like Muhammad Qutb, people like Ruhollah Khomeini, people like Ayman Zawahiri, and people like Osama bin Laden. And there are several of those around us. Al-Qaeda and ISIS function on the teaching of Sayyid Qutb. He inspired the likes of Ayman Zawahiri and Osama bin Laden, and these two went on to inspire ISIS and several